Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to get... I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
You know, there's been a lot of talk lately about Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein.
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 Epstein. Epstein case file.
The files, and what the public is still not being told. But now it's not just conspiracy forums asking questions. It's tearing apart Trump's own inner circle. Dan Bongino, someone who's been one of the most vocal defenders of the MAGA movement, might be on his way out of the FBI.
I got a call from the president, and he couldn't have been nicer. And I obviously keep the contents of it between us, but I think you get the gist about what it was about.
According to multiple sources, he clashed behind closed doors with Attorney General Pam Bondi over how the Epstein files were handled.
Bongino is out of control furious. He is threatening to quit and torch Pam, AG Bondi, unless she's fired.
And ever since, things haven't been the same. He's taken time off. Some say he's done for good. Others insist he's just regrouping. Either way, the fallout is real, and the fight over these files has exposed major cracks in a team that once looked completely unified.
I gave up everything for this. I mean, you know, my wife is struggling. I'm not a victim. I'm not Jim Comey. It's fine. I did this, and I'm proud I did it.
Before entering the political spotlight, Dan Bongino spent years in law enforcement, first with the NYPD, then the US Secret Service. He started in 1995 as a police cadet, later becoming a full officer in Brooklyn's 75th Precinct. By 1999, he joined the Secret Service, where he earned recognition on a financial crimes task force. In 2006, he was promoted to the Presidential Protective Division, serving under both Presidents Bush and Obama. He led overseas security operations and commanded teams typically reserved for higher-ranking agents. Bongino left government service in 2010. Instead of stepping back, he pivoted into conservative media. He built a massive following through his podcast and Fox News appearances, hammering themes like election fraud, government overreach, and what he called deep state corruption. In 2018, he said bluntly, "My entire life right now is about owning the libs." That style made his 2025 appointment by President Trump to Deputy Director of the FBI all the more explosive. It was the first time in the Bureau's 117-year history that someone without FBI experience was given the second highest position. To critics, it was a political stunt. To his base, it was long-awaited justice. But the celebration didn't last. Within months, Bongino was caught in the center of the Epstein files controversy. What began as a symbolic appointment turned into a pressure campaign from every side. The White House, Congress, the public, and his own supporters. What follows is how that pressure escalated, and why Bongino may be close to stepping down.
FBI Director Dan Bongino didn't show up to work on Friday, and he's told people he is considering resigning. FBI officials disagreed with Bondi's handling of the issue. Bongino denied that he was behind the leaks.
The pressure on Dan Bongino didn't erupt overnight. It had been building quietly, tied to one of the most explosive topics in the country, the Epstein investigation. In early 2025, expectations around a long-suppressed Epstein client list were higher than ever. Attorney General Pam Bondi publicly hinted at its release, even claiming during a Fox News interview that the list was sitting on her desk. Bongino, now serving as Deputy Director of the FBI, was closely aligned with that messaging. He had spent years questioning Epstein's death and promoting the idea of a broader cover-up involving elite figures. His appointment was seen by many as a signal that long-awaited disclosures were finally on the way. That perception collapsed in July when the Justice Department released its official review. The memo signed by DOJ and FBI leadership, including Bongino, stated that there was no credible evidence of a client list, no blackmail network, and no further charges recommended. Much of the material, it said, was already public. The conclusion contradicted what Bondi had suggested for months and caught Bongino's own audience off guard. The backlash was immediate. Online supporters, particularly within the MAGA movement, felt blindsided. The man they believed would break the story wide open had signed off on shutting it down. The situation worsened with the release of jail surveillance footage showing Epstein's final hours.
We released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was.
The administration framed the 10-hour video as definitive proof that no foul play occurred. But a 1-minute gap during a key moment quickly became the new focus. Officials claimed the lapse was caused by an automatic system reset at midnight, something that happened daily. The explanation didn't land. Bongino had personally backed the decision to release the footage, thinking it would resolve doubts. It had the opposite effect. High-profile MAGA influencers like Laura Loomer accused him of enabling a cover-up and called for Bondi to step down. Some urged Bongino to publicly break ranks and demand answers. Inside the administration, trust was eroding. Trump was reportedly furious about the optics. The alliance between the FBI, DOJ, and political leadership began to fracture, and Bongino was caught in the middle. A position that once looked like a bold statement now looked like a trap. And the man who'd spent years promising answers was suddenly facing calls for accountability himself.
The evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night.
Tensions reached their peak during a closed-door meeting at the White House. In the room were Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Deputy AG Todd Blanche, Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, and her deputy Taylor Budowich. Every major player was present, and none of them were on the same page. The meeting was triggered by a News Nation report suggesting that Bongino and Patel had tried to push for broader Epstein disclosures, but were blocked internally. Bondi confronted Bongino directly, accusing him of leaking. He denied it, but the accusation set off a chain reaction. Multiple people in the room described the exchange as volatile. Bongino, already under pressure from the fallout, exploded. Sources say he stormed out, furious and visibly shaken. According to one person close to him, he later said, "This destroyed my career." He didn't return to work the next day. Officially, the White House said he was still on the job. Privately, few believed it. One aide said flatly, "He ain't coming back." Behind the scenes, Bongino felt abandoned. He blamed Bondi for creating unrealistic public expectations around the Epstein files, and believed he had been left holding the fallout. Bondi, meanwhile, continued receiving public support from Trump, who attended an event with her that same week. Vice President J.D. Vance tried to calm things down, calling Patel, Bongino, and Bondi over the weekend to de-escalate. But the conversation had already shifted. This was no longer about strategy. It was about survival. By Monday, DOJ leadership had yet to reach out to Bongino. The White House kept quiet. Trump called him a very good guy in public, but according to multiple sources, he was growing impatient and felt Bongino had mishandled the situation. This wasn't a solo crisis. The Epstein fallout pulled in some of the most powerful names in Trump's inner circle, each with something to protect. Pam Bondi had set the tone early. At a February event attended by MAGA influencers, she distributed binders labeled the Epstein Files Phase 1 and told Fox News that a client list was on her desk.
James Comer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. They still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI, they're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn.
It raised expectations across conservative media. But months later, when the DOJ memo was released, those claims were nowhere to be found. The memo confirmed Epstein's suicide.
He killed himself. You want me to get, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Said there was no client list, and stated that most of the records had already been made public. The promised revelations didn't exist. At her next press event, Bondi avoided questions entirely. She focused on fentanyl and public safety, steering the conversation away from Epstein. Critics called it a deflection. Inside the administration, frustration mounted, but Trump stood by her. Days later, he appeared at a soccer game with Bondi, sending a clear signal. She still had the president's backing. Kash Patel, now leading the FBI, had co-signed the same memo. While he had previously supported transparency around the case, he chose a different path once the backlash started. Patel was reportedly frustrated by Bondi's earlier comments, especially those implying the FBI was still handling the files when the review had already moved to the DOJ. He was questioned internally about possible leaks, but kept his distance publicly. On social media, he dismissed the growing criticism and made it clear he had no plans to resign. His focus was on staying in position, not fueling controversy. Todd Blanche, as Deputy Attorney General, stepped in to manage the optics. He issued a statement claiming there was no divide between DOJ and FBI leadership. According to Blanche, he had worked directly with Patel and Bongino on the memo, and all three had signed off together. The message was designed to project unity, not transparency. Internally, the rift was obvious. His statement wasn't a clarification. It was an attempt to contain the fallout before it reached any further. Dan Bongino hasn't resigned, but he's no longer acting like someone still in the job. After the confrontation at the White House, he stepped away from FBI headquarters and hasn't returned. Internally, his absence is raising concern. One bureau official called it a pressing issue. He's now in Florida, weighing his next move. There's been no formal statement, but sources close to him say he feels betrayed. Caught between a political base demanding action, an administration distancing itself, and a public response that turned hostile almost overnight. He's vented privately about the fallout, blaming Pam Bondi for making promises the team couldn't deliver. In one conversation, he reportedly said, "I'll torch Pam unless she's fired." The White House is watching closely. Trump has offered polite public praise, calling Bongino a good guy. But staff say he's frustrated behind the scenes and wants the story closed. There's growing doubt that Bongino can recover his position. If he doesn't walk, he may be quietly forced out. Some believe he'll return to conservative media, where his voice still carries weight and the platform is safer. Others see him as the fall guy, someone the administration can hold responsible without disrupting the broader image of unity. Either way, the role he once held as a symbol of MAGA's power inside federal law enforcement has started to collapse. His presence now serves as a reminder, not of strength, but of how quickly things can break down.
There is more coming on the Epstein files. Listen, I know this is a hot potato for folks. I totally understand. My comments were clear. I'm not paid for my opinions anymore. I work for the taxpayer now. I'm paid on evidence. That's it.
Dan Bongino was brought into the FBI to shake up the system. Now, he's on the edge of being pushed out by the very people who brought him in. All of it over a client list that never materialized and a video that raised more questions than it answered. So where does this leave the movement that put him there? Is this a sign of internal collapse or just political cleanup? Should Bongino step down? Was he used? Or did the whole operation fall apart under the weight of its own hype? Let's know what you think in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more, and stay tuned as we keep tracking what happens next.